Okay, everyone, welcome. Oh, hello, I should say, really. I haven't seen you for a while. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to kind of walk you through a little bit with the exam, give you some feedback, give you some tips. What I would like you to do is to make plenty of notes. I've also got a little task for you where I want you to be thinking about some targets too. And this is all going to go on your blog as a kind of nice, organised bit of feedback. So I'll explain a little bit more at the end how that's going to work. So first thing you need to do is just make sure you've got your answers to hand. I've handed those back, so hopefully you've received them, ready for this recording. So you need your answers to go through, and you'll need to have some paper to make some notes on as well. And I'll take you through a question at a time. So first, let's just remind ourselves of the sources. You had your two sources, source A and source B, the Telegraph and the Guardian, with a focus on the Windrush story. Okay, so then you get your four questions to consider basically how the representation is being used and how we can apply certain theorists to what we see in these sources. So your questions were as follows. You have your four questions, 10 mark, 15 mark, and then two more 10s. Question 1 and 4 both focus on theorists. Question 2 was a focus on the conventions, and question 3 was about context, in this case political context. So we're going to walk it through question 1, 2, 3 and 4. Okay, so in this I'm going to be asking you to read through your answer and have a look at what you put down. So let's first of all take question 1. It says, analyse the different social representations in source A and source B. Apply Gilroy's theory of representation in your answer. Okay, now, several of you in this wrote nothing, left a blank answer, and there were others who wrote very, very little. So what that pointed out to me, I think, and even looking at those that did answer, I think there was a general, not everybody, but generally, a lack of knowledge about Gilroy's theory. Okay, now we could maybe say that's a little worrying. Why don't we know it? But I think that the positive thing here is that that's fixable. You can just revise. If you didn't answer this question, I think it's likely that you probably didn't revise it, and you probably know that yourself. So brushing up on your theories is absolutely crucial. If you don't know the theories, you cannot answer the question. Very, very difficult to, and you're going to score low marks. So first of all, what I'd like you to do is have a read of your answer now. Before we do anything else, just pause this video, have a read of your answer. Okay, so hopefully you've had a read through there. What I want you to do first of all, though, first thing, I want you to have a look. We went through, I went through several times. I did a couple of different lessons, focus on each individual question. So I did a lesson all about question 1 a couple of times. You had Mr. OP's after school session that he did where he took you through it as well. And you were advised in all of those, the first thing you need to do in this answer is outline the theory, explain basically what the theory is. So just look in your answer now, highlight it if you can spot it, just have a look, underline, circle in your opening paragraph, did you outline the theory first? It's the way you need to structure your answer. So just check, pause if you need to, and come back to me. Okay. Now, if you didn't do that, then there's the first note you can maybe make. Something that you need to do next time. It's not relevant to Gilroy, it's any theorist you should outline at the very beginning of your answer. Second thing, what you needed to do in your answer was balance this theory against both sources. So the question is asking you to analyse the social representations in light of Gilroy's theory, effectively. Okay, so Gilroy's theory is about post-colonialism, this whole kind of hang-up and this whole kind of belief that white British are more important, more significant, the marginalisation of kind of ethnic minorities and so on. So you need to then have a look. Just go through your answer again now, pause again if you need to, but go through and have a look in, do I mention specifically where I see this example happening in source A, and do I mention how it is portrayed in source B? Have I done that with both sources? Pause and come back. Okay, if you did do that, that's the kind of balance of the essay that you need. If you didn't do that, again, that's something to note down. Next time, I need to make sure I reference both sources in light of the theory. Now, third thing, did you counter the theory? Again, you're advised to do this. Whatever the theory is, you want to give evidence of where we see it at play, but also maybe something that suggests that Gilroy's theory might not work, or whatever theory you're applying in this question might not work, or maybe it's a little bit different. Did you maybe include something like that? Just have a look, see whether you managed to counter or challenge the theory, or suggest that the theory isn't quite appropriate in these examples. Pause if you need to. Okay, and last, fourthly, did you maintain focus on representation? The question was about representation. So did you just start talking about, I don't know, conventional features? Did you start talking about media language aspects? Did you actually make it about representation? So for example, just as one specific example, the picture of Ant McPartlin, did you take him as, you know, a representation of kind of white, wealthy, middle-aged men? Or did you talk about just, this is how Ant McPartlin is represented as an individual? Because when we're talking about representation, usually we're talking about how the individual is used to represent wider social groups. So did you manage to keep that in mind? Again, look at your answer and see if you made those kind of comments. Just pause if you need to. Okay. Now, there's four kind of key things that you should do within your answer. I just want to quickly run through now here a few key things that you could have said. These are indicative comments that are specific to these sources. So you needed to show an appreciation of Gilroy's theory of post-colonialism. So the idea that the Caribbean was a previous British colony, obviously, and Gilroy effectively arguing that Britain suffers from this kind of what he calls post-colonial melancholia, whereby white British are presented as superior to black counterparts, for example. You may have commented, for example, that the Telegraph fails to appreciate the significance of the Windrush generation because, and this was kind of a big glaring thing that you really need to pick up on, they don't use a picture. It's their main story, but their main picture is of Ant McPartlin. You know, this white, wealthy male. So there's a marginalisation of ethnic minorities there if you look at it from that perspective. If you look at The Guardian, it's slightly different. We've got a little bit more appreciation. You've got this kind of bowing, sort of slightly submissive Theresa May with a more dominant Caribbean representative. Maybe this is something that suggests there's a shift away from that kind of idea, so a slight criticism, or not criticism, but a challenge to Gilroy's application there. The very fact that but you could also argue the very fact she's not actually shaking hands is a bit of an awkward choice of image, isn't it? The still image from the video maybe suggests that the apology is not quite enough. There's something about the way The Guardian are portraying that there as well. And ultimately, fundamentally, you could say that the very fact that Britain are actually sending people back in the first place, that is the kind of thing that's happening, and the head of state has to issue an apology, maybe indicates that there is this strange relationship with its colonial past, like Gilroy has suggested. So there were some specific things that you could have said. Right, I've got it on your PowerPoint there. You'll see a picture of the mark scheme. You'll be able to look at your own marks, obviously, and see kind of where you fitted, whether you gave a kind of a comprehensive answer, as you can see at the top, an adequate kind of answer where there was some knowledge, or very minimal. You would have likely got marks 1 to 3. Obviously, if you didn't put anything, you wouldn't have got a mark. But you do need to make sure you have a go at these things. But you can have a little look at that mark scheme if you wish. But what I would like you to do now is to give yourself a target based on how to approach question 1 next time. What do you think you need to do in order to be able to answer question 1 properly? Is it the way you structure your answer? Is it to remember to reference both sources? Is it about revising your theorists? You know, give yourself a target, note that down, and you'll upload this onto your blog later on. Okay? So, have a go at that, pause me, and then come back for question 2. Okay, question 2. Question 2 was about looking at the sources from both A and B, but you're asked the question, how far do those sources challenge genre convention of print and online news? Okay, now this is a 15-mark question, so you had to make sure you get this one right. And there was 3 things you're asked to do. It says, in your answer, you must explain the genre conventions analyse the use of the conventions, and make judgments and reach conclusions about how far they challenge genre convention. So let's just break that down. So again, have a look at your answer, pause it if you need to, have a read of it and come back. Once you've done that, I want you to have a look at this first bit. So first of all, did you have accurate knowledge? And again, I would argue that maybe through lack of revision, there was quite a few of you who got muddled up or got this wrong. You need to know that Source A is a broadsheet. You could call it a quality tabloid if you like, but it means the same thing. Some of you were claiming that the Telegraph was a mid-market or that it was a tabloid even. Did you correctly identify which one is right-wing and left-wing? Again, there was lots of confusion there. Some of you were talking about the Telegraph as being left-wing and the Guardian being right-wing. This is inaccurate and you need to make sure you have this knowledge. So brushing up on your knowledge is absolutely vital. You know, Source B is a web page, a broadsheet web page, and Source A was a broadsheet or quality tabloid newspaper. So you had to think about that. Did you use correct terminology? Were you referencing, you know, bylines, copies? You know, were you talking about the right kind of terms, mastheads, etc.? So check your knowledge. Have a look through. Were you accurate and correct? Pause and come back. Secondly, look at your answer and actually just have a look for a moment how many times you used the word convention or conventional. You were asked about convention. Were you talking about that? Didn't you talk about typical conventions? Broadsheets would normally have this, or conventionally a web page would be expected to look like this. You have to be clear in identifying that. Again, pause so you can highlight and pick those out. Check how many times you actually reference it. It should be quite a lot. And if it's not, again, that's something you can set yourself as a target. Third, how many conventional features of a broadsheet did you actually identify? Go through and count. How many times did you correctly say that usually broadsheets have this? We would expect broadsheets to report on this kind of thing, use this kind of language, have these amount of images, etc. You're asked that, the first bullet point, explain the genre conventions of print and online news. You had to identify. So look at those, come back. When you've done that, now do the opposite. How many features of a website did you identify? Did you correctly say that websites would normally have interactive content, encourage audience participation, they might have these kind of features, etc.? Did you identify that? And then, how many non-conventional features of either of them did you identify? Did you actually challenge it? Did you conclude, did you look at that and say, well, you know, usually broadsheets might do this, however, this is non-conventional because it's doing this. How much of that did you find as not being conventional? Because you need to have that in there as well. And there were non-conventional aspects of these. So pause, count through, highlight them, label them, come back. Okay, finally, did you reach a conclusion? So hopefully the good answers would have found and commented on the fact that actually the broadsheet Telegraph reporting its main story on a celebrity drink driving charge doesn't feel very broadsheet. That is not hard news. It's not politics. It's not major, you know, political stories. It's celebrity, which seems very much a tabloid idea. Now that is what we could call hybridization. It's a move of the broadsheets to become a little bit more tabloid. You could have commented on that and made comments as to why. These are things we've talked about before, the way the news industry is losing money and a need to kind of pick up sales and so on, kind of things that you could have identified there. Okay, so look at that. Have a look. Did you actually reach a conclusion? Did you reach a conclusion in an effective way? Is something that you can make comments on there. And then, like before, I'll just quickly show you some of the things you could have said. We would have expected to have seen a high ratio of copy on a broadsheet, traditional ornate mastheads that kind of suggest tradition and trust. The featured stories, politics and business. However, like we said there, a main story of an entertainer fined for drink driving is much more tabloid, even as is the size of the picture. Some soft news elements like sport and weddings. Maybe you could bring in Steve Neal's theory on hybridization. The sidebar on the left-hand side is a little bit more tabloid too. So it wasn't really a typical example of a broadsheet. The Guardian, many things you would expect a quality tabloid website to have. Hard news, high copy to image ratio with culturally kind of sophisticated topics, lots of interactivity,